Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, a comment would be great. And if you're listening to this as a podcast episode, well, you can always leave a like. Today, my guest is Jada Selma. She's a clinical research specialist. What does that mean? I don't know, but we'll find out. She has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and like past guests, I'm really interested to find out about why she went the graduate school route and her plans while she was pursuing her doctorate and after she was done. And those can often be quite interesting stories. So, welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Jada.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Neil. Glad to be here.
So, from the bit of research I did on you, I did mention that you studied, you first got your bachelor's in biomedical engineering, but where did the interest in biomedical engineering come from in the first place?
So I have always been interested in biology. Actually, growing up, that was my favorite subject in school. So I just always had a really interest in science. But my parents also saw that I did really well in math, which can be, a really hard subject for kids. And actually, kind of the engineering piece came into that. My older sister, did chemical engineering. And I think because I sometimes felt like I was following in her shadows because we had similar interests, I think I kind of was adverse to going into engineering for that reason. But my mom thought with my interest in science and me doing very well in math that actually biomedical engineering might be a way for me to go as well. So actually I had considered doing biochemistry at first. And my mom actually set up meetings with the department heads in those departments at Mississippi State because she was still connected to school. That was her alma mater. And when I spoke with the department with biomedical engineering, all of it just really clicked. I liked the biology part of it, but that engineering was geared more towards problem solving and figuring out how can you use engineering tools or medical devices and things of that nature in order to solve and alleviate health problems with people. So that was what attracted me to bioengineering.
Okay, but you didn't stop there. I mean, it did mention you got a PhD in biomedical engineering. So, what was the motivation to go for your doctorate?
So I will say that bioengineering, it's so interesting. It's one of the newer engineering disciplines, and because of that, then the curriculum can be very different depending on what school that you go to, because one school could be very they could really focus, like say, on orthopedics. There could be a school where it's more on the order of biological engineering, so you're doing more um, sometimes in the order of like looking at I've seen people focus on doing things like in agriculture or like more like environmental things depending on the emphasis. So for me, when I was starting to think about my career, it was kind of hard to figure out what area I wanted to go into. And also um, biomedical engineering was a newer discipline at Mississippi State, so that wasn't an engineering that they were really, I would say, known for, like their chemical engineering program, their civil engineering. So to be honest, when I went to the career fairs, there weren't a lot of people who were recruiting just for biomedical engineers. And I was lucky enough to do a co-op though while I was there. So I took 2 semesters off and I worked at Baxter Healthcare. And with that, I realized that I worked more with industrial engineers in manufacturing. And I realized I did not want to do manufacturing. And I realized I was more interested also in the medical products that they were doing and what diseases they were trying to treat rather than like the development, right, of the devices, like once it's on the product floor. So after that experience, actually, it was my academic advisor, um, Dr. Rada at Mississippi State, who encouraged me that maybe I would be more interested in research. And so he suggested that I apply to the Amgen Scholars Program. And it's a program that exposes undergrads to research, where you go to a different, they have them at several schools like Berkeley, MIT. There's even one in London, I believe. So they're all across the country and international. So I applied and got into to the one at MIT, and did a research project there for the summer. And with that, they had a career panel too. So there was a conference for all the Amgen scholars, and they actually talked about all the different types of careers that you could do with a PhD. And I had only never considered doing a PhD because I thought that you could only be a professor with that, and I didn't really think that that's necessarily what I wanted to do. So actually, after the Amgen Scholars Program is when I came back. I mean, that was the summer before my senior year, and I came back and was like, okay, I'm going to apply to grad school. And now looking back in that whole process, I would say I was very fortunate that it worked out for me because actually, when I got into grad school, I realized that there were undergrads who had been working towards this like their whole entire like time. Like they knew that from the beginning that they wanted to go to grad school. So I felt very fortunate that I started the summer before to apply and was actually able to get into grad school. So, but of course, I still had, I just had not done as much research as other people, but I had, done other things in preparation or, had excelled very well in school that still helped me to progress in that way. So I just kind of want to let, your audience know too that you can pivot and, make decisions and it can still work out for you, even if, you feel like that wasn't something that you prepared for, over a longer period of time than other people.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned that when you thought about PhD initially, you thought that that meant you wanted to stay be in academia, but you weren't sure if that was the path you wanted to take. While you were in graduate school, did you determine then that academia wasn't the path you wanted to take and that you wanted to go into industry?
Yeah, so it was, I was still being open and trying to consider all areas. But I feel like I discovered kind of early on that I was thinking that I didn't probably want to stay in academia. Um, it's it can be tough actually because how should I say, especially being at an RO1 school like Georgia Tech, you learn though that your advisors and the professors that you're around, that isn't going to necessarily be your experience when you graduate, because there are I would say there's still, getting a PhD is not a privilege or an opportunity that everybody gets. I mean, still, there's not a big portion of the US population has a PhD, but there are more that are increasing. So due to that, and that, you have professors who, that's the whole goal, right? You reach to get tenure. So, I mean, once you have tenure, those positions are locked. There's right. So with more people getting PhDs now, there's just less opportunity to get a tenure track faculty position. And particularly in my field, it's not in all fields, but I guess because it's more bio kind of wet lab focused, that you have a postdoc position that you are supposed to do in between your graduate school and being a professor. And so when I was there, I just saw some of the postdocs, who were around me who had been, a postdoc is supposed to be an intermediate position. And I was seeing people doing postdocs 5+ years, like where they could have gotten honestly another PhD even if they wanted to. And so I was just, and I'll be honest, because grad school was difficult for me. It took me kind of a really long time to find my fitting and get a project that worked. I was honestly a little nervous about, how should I say too, because academia is very set on your publication um, amount as well. And I really kind of published later on and didn't have, a full like slate of publications as well. So I just wasn't really sure about how successful I could be going that route into academia. And so I feel like kind of early on that I decided to just look into other options, and industry was appealing to me just for my time in co-op. And then also I did an internship for one summer with Boston Scientific as well when I was in grad school, due to a fellowship that I got in grad school. So that also helped me to expose me to med devices even more, and what else I could do with my PhD.
I commend you for finishing your PhD, Jada, because some may not know this, but I started a PhD program but never finished it. I got through 1 year, and I remember I finished the year and I went back home for, actually, I hadn't even finished the year yet. It was during Christmas break during that first year, and I went back home and I went to visit a friend who I went to school with in undergrad, and he didn't do graduate school. He just went straight into industry. He was working at IBM, I think, and he had his own condo. I couldn't even spell condo, let alone own one at the time. But he had invited some of his friends over to play poker, and they were playing with money that I didn't have. So I couldn't even participate. I'm just sitting there like a spectator. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to be poor anymore. So during that holiday break, I decided, you know what? I don't think this PhD thing's for me. So I just finished up that 1 year, and I was out. And then I think a few months later, I took a job in industry. So kudos to you for actually finishing it. And I think a lot of people they have the same experience that you do. You know, they may have even came into the university, go into their PhD program thinking academia is it. I want to get a tenure track position. But then they realize that those people who got those tenure positions, they ain't going anywhere. And it's not as if a whole bunch of positions are being created for all the people who have PhDs. So what happens to them? You could do a postdoc for 5 years. I never even thought of it, but you're absolutely right. You could have gotten a whole other PhD in that time. But then, and you're just there just waiting, just, okay, maybe a position will open up, and every year maybe you apply, but how many other people are applying for those same positions and you don't get it? And it's one more year of a PhD, and it's just, at some point you might just decide, hey, that I'm not sure that this is worth it. Maybe just go get a job in industry and get paid money.
Right, exactly. Like my, I was the first person in my family too to go to graduate school, let alone get a PhD. And so I was, I didn't know about, anything. I kind of was trying to figure out my own path. And my parents too were surprised. I think they were a little surprised when they were like, oh, you sure that you don't, want to be a professor? And I kind of told her about the whole process, my family, the whole process that it takes. And my family was surprised too, to learn also too of like the salary that you're on when you're as a postdoc. And they're like, but you have a full, graduate degree. And so I'll be honest, I'll say that too for it's not just for, I would say, Black and brown people, but I would say especially, being an underrepresented minority, more than likely we are one of the first in our family to go. And then, your family has made maybe so many sacrifices to get to where you are. And honestly, it's another big sacrifice for a lot of people to possibly have to go another 3, 5+ years on a salary that that kind of doesn't equate to all the time and effort that you've put in, that your family may be expecting that you've quote unquote made it now, right? And you're still making I mean, this is not to offend postdocs by any means, but it is a financial sacrifice to also have to put in the time for the postdoc until you can make it to a faculty position. And a lot of people are just unfortunately not able to be in that position for again, after already doing 5+ years for graduate school. So it is something that has to be considered.
Oh yeah, 100%. I wish I could have been there when you were telling your family about the whole postdoc process. It's like, you can get paid how much?
Yeah, so they were right.
How many
Exactly.
have been PhD? What? Nah, you know what? This whole industry thing, I think this is something you should look into. You know what I'm saying? That's wonderful. So, I also I mentioned in the intro that you work as a clinical research specialist. So what does that mean? What does your job entail?
Oh, thank you. So I should say too that it may have a different title, at different companies, but I work for a med device company and Microtronic currently. And in my role as a clinical research specialist, I would say I work on our clinical evidence team. And really, I would say my role is, I say, a mashup between two roles that people probably heard of before, which is a medical writer or a medical science liaison. So my more, I would say, part of my in-house part of my role is that I work with clinical trial data. So we'll have, data that comes in from our clinical trials, and I'll write the manuscripts for that data, or, I'll be over the particular project or a particular trial, being over the publication strategy for that data. Then as well as working with physicians on, they may want data pooled that they have, because they have contributed data to that clinical trial, and they want to present data at a conference. So I'll write the abstracts and help them put together the presentation for those conferences as well. And then that's more like the medical writer piece. And then I should say also in-house will be where we will do some training for the field team. So we have what we call clinical specialists to support cases for, doctors who are using our devices within the field and the hospital. And then also we have our marketing team and, our sales team as well, who part of sales actually also will cover cases in the hospital. And so also as the clinical evidence team, we will help to provide doing training and updating people on the newest clinical data that they need to be aware of while they're out in the field, that that could be helpful to their clients, to our customers. And then also the medical science liaison portion of my job is where we are going out into the field more now and talking with physicians, so presenting them with the science and the clinical data that's behind our products. So just of a way to kind of connect more with our customers. We're not able to connect with every single doctor, that's at conferences and things like that. So having a more personal connection where we can provide that support to doctors so that they can make the best, clinical decisions for their patients.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. So yeah, medical science liaison and a medical writer position all in one. I'm sure every day is not a boring day. You get to do a bunch of different things. I think that's really cool, and the I guess the outcome of that, finishing your PhD and moving into a role like that, that's great. I'm glad I'm glad it all worked out. So Jada, when it comes to this podcast and this YouTube channel, it's about the public speaking journeys of people with technical backgrounds. I started it based on me working as an engineer, not being all that great at presenting in front of people, but getting better at it. But when it comes to you presenting in front of people or public speaking generally, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Good question. I would, yeah, I would definitely say it wasn't something that I've always necessarily been good at. What I feel like I'm pretty good at putting the presentation together. But then definitely, yeah, I have a lot of nerves before presenting to people. So what I feel like what has helped me, and I'm still in my journey of, I've just really have kind of started getting out there more in the field and speaking with physicians. But what has helped me is I have learned it's not maybe the best to try to memorize a script, because I found that like maybe, somebody might ask a question in the middle and that kind of, throws you off your rhythm. Or if you maybe forget a particular part, then that would maybe kind of tend for me to then, feel more nervous and then maybe forget like the rest of the script. So what has really helped me is to actually write out a script, which actually just helps me to get all of my kind of thoughts together of like, what are the important things that I want to be able to say. So usually if it's a, PowerPoint presentation, then I'll do that in the notes section. But then I'm kind of more so aiming to not memorize it, but just practice that script enough to where I know the material well enough to where I feel like, I don't need to look at the script, but that I'm not necessarily memorizing the script, but like I know it well enough now where I know the important points that I want to make. And that usually helps to alleviate my anxiety about the presentation, just feeling the most prepared that I can. And I've And so realize that like no matter how much you prepare, usually somebody you might have a good idea of what questions you may get, but like there's always going to be a question that you're just not prepared for. And I've just been trying to get better at like those are the things that you can't predict, and that it's also okay to say like, hey, it's a really good question. I need to get back to you on that, so I can have more time to gather more information. And usually my audience of physicians have been okay with that as well, because they want to make sure that you're giving them the most accurate answer, right? So if they're okay with you needing time to go back and maybe confer with my team, who there may be somebody on the team who's more of an expert in that particular area.
I commend you for being honest enough to admit when you don't know the answer. When I first started giving presentations, because I figured I was the technical lead on a project, if not, especially if a decision maker asked me a question, I felt like I had to give an answer, even if I didn't know what the answer was. And I justified it thinking, well, no matter what answer I give them, it's not as if they'll be able to call me out on it because they don't know the background anyway. But it was a terrible idea, and I highly suggest people not do that, because every now and then you might get called out by giving it, after giving an answer that you really weren't all that sure about, but someone else in the audience was way more sure about it than you were. So kudos to you for knowing that, hey, if you don't know the answer to something, it's best to say that you don't know, but you can find out whatever the answer is. So good for you on that. Well, when it comes to giving presentations or public speaking generally, for the people who are listening or watching this conversation, what would your number one tip be?
That's a good question. Number one tip. That's a good. I would say the number one tip I would give would be for whatever presentation that you're giving, to consider your audience. That it may be the same material, but if you're giving it to, say, a physician, or you're maybe this time you're talking to the admin of a hospital, or you may be you're talking at career day, right? And you're giving it to high school students because you're telling them about your career, or you may be speaking to people who may be scientists, but they're outside your field, or people who don't have a scientific background. Like, I feel like that's the most important thing that um, I've been told of. You want to consider what you're talking about and who you're talking about it to. And then that will determine what are the major points that you want to make, and what is your main message that you want your audience to leave with. And then I feel like having that in mind will then help you to guide you to creating the best presentation that you can. So one, you want to start with what's the most important material and how best to present that material to engage your audience. And then depending on who your audience is, of like what is the best way to tell that story that you want to relay. So I feel like always start with who is your target audience and then work back from there.
I 100% agree with you, Jada. I firmly believe that when it comes to presentations, knowing who you're talking to is very important. And then when it comes to putting a presentation together, I firmly believe in working backwards, figuring out what that main message is, and then what do I need to tell these people that will lead to whatever that main message is? Because you took the time and effort to put a presentation together. You don't want people to leave your presentation not knowing what you hope that they would know. I actually went to a conference a year ago, and there were a number of presentations. It wasn't a technical conference, but there were a number of people who gave presentations who were very skilled speakers. And if you were to hold a gun to my head and ask me what any of those presentations were about, I couldn't tell you. But I could tell you they moved around the stage really well. I could tell you they didn't use a whole lot of filler words, but what their actual message was, no clue. So hopefully when people are giving presentations, especially presentations that are meant to impart information, you really need to take your audience into account and figure out the best way to impart that message so that it's memorable. So I'm firmly on board with you on that. This has been a really great conversation, Jada. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
So yes, You can get in touch with me through LinkedIn. So my full name is Jada Selma. Um, and I don't have a I don't have my own web page. But people could get in contact with me. I would say, yeah, through LinkedIn would be the best way. And then from there, then we can connect through email, let's say.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Jada.
All right. Thank you, Neil.